I was telling you about Bologna. Is a great city, apart from food, for the startup ecosystem is buzzing. Content creators, musicians, artists. Bologna is a crazy city.
Oh, I love it here. It's interesting. I never had stepped foot in Bologna before I moved here.
Hmm.
So I moved here sight unseen, not knowing what I was getting into, and I think I picked the perfect place in Italy for myself to live. So I'm very excited here.
Wow, that was a great choice. You did like I've chosen my latest tennis racket based on the name, and that's it. I didn't try to say, did you try? No, I mean, I just bought it. I think it was a great name. That's it. But why did you move to Bologna?
Well, so first, we picked Italy. So I was living in San Francisco, and our daughter went to a really amazing school in San Francisco. It's considered a Reggio Emilia school, so it has a lot of the teachings and philosophies of like the Reggio Emilia education
Right.
philosophy. And then we thought, okay, um, once I left Airbnb, we thought, okay, maybe we should have a change of scenery, live abroad for a little bit. We decided Italy to kind of keep my daughter's Italian going. In San Francisco, they spoke to her in Italian, so she had a decent understanding of the language. And then the next question is which city? And we got mixed reviews on a bunch of cities. Some people love Rome; they say it's too busy. Some people say Florence is beautiful, but there's a lot of tourists. And somehow we ended up in Bologna, where there's a good international school. And we've once again never stepped foot in Bologna. Arrived, and every day I'm here, I love it more and more. And usually some Americans, they get tired after 6 months. I'm
Yeah.
8 months in. I want to be here for a few more years at least.
Oh wow, incredible. I mean, last time I've been to Italy, I brought my family there. My wife, she's British, and they were in love. Yeah, but also because it's a kind of city that you can go around, you can walk around. It's not like Rome, that is
Hmm. Yeah.
with all my Rome friends, it's a chaos, Rome. And it's a disaster. If you want to move around, it's a disaster. But I mean, Bologna has a definitely good mix. What about the startup ecosystem that you found there?
I haven't really been too indoctrinated into the startup ecosystem here outside of Music's Match, where I am currently.
Right.
But what I've noticed is the universities here and the couple companies and couple students that I've talked to, the engineering in Bologna, but just across Italy, is really strong, very very strong. And I think that there are ingredients for a really robust tech ecosystem in Italy and in Bologna.
Yeah, also a lot of young, let's say that it's not an old city, so it's a
Hmm.
young city.
Yes,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of experimentation. I was telling you about the content creators. I know at least 3 YouTubers that are from Bologna, and they're like millions of followers. I mean, and they do really interesting stuff, and they mix it with music. So it's very interesting. Sometimes it's funny how you completely underestimate maybe a city like that because you know Milan and Rome and
Hmm.
so it's interesting. What's the plan there? What are you going to do in Bologna?
So, the plan is the first plan was to change of scenery and to have, more time with kids. And as I've been here, I've become a lot more active as a mentor, advisor, investor, and especially like within Europe, learning more about the European tech ecosystem. And then more recently, I have become excited about being more helpful to the Italian tech ecosystem. I'm really grateful that Italy gave me a visa, has allowed me to stay for a few years, and maybe my way of giving back is, okay, can I be helpful to the Italian tech companies? But one thing that's kind of interesting, that's maybe different from Italian tech than, for example, French tech. French tech has a hub, and it's Paris, but in Italy it's kind of spread out. So you have, Bologna, you have Torino, you have Milan, you have Rome, you have Florence. And so like there's no real sense of, a center of gravity. But what's great is that Bologna is like right in the middle of all those things. So, nothing is more than a 2.5 hour train ride. And I can wake up, be in Torino, have some meetings, come
Yeah,
back in time for dinner.
yeah, definitely. I was chatting with a friend here in Brighton. I live in UK for 10 years now, and he's an Italian living in London,
Mhm.
and we were both saying the same thing. It's unbelievable. Italy, we have a lot of talents. There are some great companies. Music Match, Max
Mhm.
Chochola is a great example of a successful founder. In the fintech, I'm thinking about ScalaPay, Satispay.
Mhm.
So you have there some interesting companies, and you have a lot of incubators, accelerators, startup accelerators, and so on. The problem that we both were trying to discover there was it's so difficult to create a network in Italy.
Mhm.
It's so difficult to collaborate. I don't know why. For me now, it's easier to collaborate with international people that they don't even know who I am than with Italians that know who I am. And I find it crazy. I say, guys, or all the why don't you create something together, instead of always competing? I don't know what you think about it, and what was your experience also in US about it?
Yeah, I can kind of see that the argument, because it's so spread out that it's hard to get concentration, critical mass in one area to be excited about it. United States, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, everybody was in tech. Just like in the same way, you go to Los Angeles and everybody's in the film and
Yeah.
entertainment industry. And so you had these collections of people who all have the same interests. And I haven't felt that yet in Italy, and I'm not even sure that's necessary anymore. And that the question remains for me is, with remote work and now any Italian engineer can work anywhere, what is the future concept of a tech hub? Like, what does that actually mean? What purpose does that solve? Maybe Italy being spread out could still be fine. But that's it's something that I think is and has been historically an issue. I just don't know how it's going to play out
Yeah.
with remote work.
What's your take on the global situation at the moment? Because I was checking this morning all the layoffs from the tech giant, tech players freezing new hiring. Klarna, I don't know, firing 700 people, something like that.
Mhm.
Inflation skyrocketing. Ukraine war. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Of course, as a entrepreneur, you are anyway optimistic and say, yeah, but I'm gonna do it anyway, and you don't care. But what's your take, and what could be a suggestion on how to ride this roller coaster?
Yeah, these are really unfortunate times for many, many reasons. Uh, but one thing that struck me about Airbnb, the company was founded 2008, 2009 during the middle of the financial crisis. And they've built a model that was extraordinarily robust in a financial crisis that was then able to thrive over time and then also weather the pandemic. And so, kind of extrapolating from that, I think that you might see companies kind of hunkering down, being more focused, trimming the fat, and really focusing on building something of extreme value that is very, very robust. And so, the next couple of years could be tough, but the fallout of that is over time we might see some really, really innovative ideas that exist when things hopefully start to get a little better. And then that's what I experienced at Airbnb. I'd also say that we've lived in a world where startups are getting an incredible amount of money to start at the seed stage with really high valuations, and I think we'll probably see a lot less of that. But I think that's a really good thing, because constraint will breed a lot of creativity, and I think the best ideas are when you don't have a lot of resources and you have to focus. You have to find like the nugget that's really, really critical. Double down on that. So I look forward. The next couple of years are kind of painful, but I look forward to the aftermath of that in terms of what kind of innovation we're going to see.
Got it. By the way, I think Airbnb is a great example of company that, for instance, got hit very, very hard with the
Hmm.
pandemic. And then I remember Brian Chesky coming on an interview at the beginning of pandemic, and it, everyone thought, wow, that's gonna be very bad. But what are you gonna do? No one can travel. But the company got it right. I don't know, got the right moves, and now it looks really, really good. How was working with Chesky and the founders there?
Ryan was my boss for most of the time I
Right.
was at Airbnb. And I mean, he's a really big thinker, and he's someone who also, in a crisis, his some of the best parts of him come out. And so, we weathered multiple crises at Airbnb, and every time I was always amazed with his ability to keep a cool head, keep really focused, and do the right thing. Oftentimes, that right thing is very hard to do. But I think in the pandemic, it was one of the most difficult things we ever dealt with. Without already the pandemic's pretty scary just on a humanity level, but to also see your business drop 70-80% almost overnight has got to be, for all of us, was so scary. But it also was a time where we said, okay, well, we have to focus. We have to, not do all the things that we thought we're going to do. Everything has changed, and to go back to the roots of what Airbnb is. It's a really great place to stay at a really great price where people want to. And it turned out that once the pandemic life, became a bit more normal for people, or the everyday for people, all of a sudden folks wanted to go nearby, but somewhere outside of the cities. And our business was set up to do that. And we were able to, you know, um, run campaigns around that and really kind of shift. And then the people themselves were just coming to the platform, searching for longer stays nearby. And our platform ended up handling it well. And we ended up ending the year with a successful IPO. So it's an example of kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it's just, if you really, really focus on the essence of providing value,
Mm.
you could be surprised what kind of conditions you can survive through.
Interesting. By the way, that while you were talking, I got this crazy memory of Airbnb. Do you remember Lisa in Venetia at the beginning?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I worked very closely with them. Yeah, I
Okay.
just saw I
So,
just saw Lisa a few weeks ago. Yeah,
oh, really? So I
yeah,
remember they came to Italy for a sort of tour. Airbnb was still very, very young
with the with the
company.
with the capes, probably, right? They had Superhost capes. Yeah.
And they came to Italy and they said, no founders were there, but they came and say, look, sort of ambassador of Airbnb to do some interviews or try to have the media talking about the company. And no one wanted to talk about Airbnb. And I had a television show on Sky TG24, which was like the Sky News Italy. And
Mhm.
I went to my director saying, look, there is Airbnb. And no one knew about it. And I said, no, but they are a cool company, blah, blah, blah. So I finally convinced them to let me have these two girls as guests. And they came, and imagine you talk on a national television about, yeah, you can rent your room of your house. I mean, I got so many complaints, from journalists saying, "What? This is fake news. This is what? What are you doing?" I said, "No, it's a real company." It was so hard to explain at the beginning, but anyway, yeah, I was thinking about that crazy moment, and
No,
then boom.
I remember when they were going on their tour, and I remember them preparing, and they were getting the capes ready, and we may have even watched that segment, back in the office, just because it was just for us, like 10, 15 people in this tiny little office, all of a sudden seeing our name more and more on the international stage. That was so exciting for us.
But when did you enter the company? Very, very early, right?
I was the ninth employee, so we were still working out of the apartment. I was the third software engineer. And you enter the apartment. Well, first of all, this threw me off at first because I had been previously in a corporate environment, and then
Right.
before that in academia. And I walked in, and first thing is you take your shoes off. And what office do you take your shoes off when you enter? But it was an actual home. Joe and Brian were still living there. You go down, and then just the energy of the apartment and the energy of the company was so palpable. It was very strong. It was very optimistic, very bright. And a few of us worked on the product with the founders, maybe three engineers. We were in one bedroom, and then all of customer support and Venetia and all of them were in a different were in the living room, and then when there was a problem with the website, we would just scream from one bedroom to the living room, "Hey, something's broken, go fix it." And it was just,
Well,
yeah, it's almost almost the most efficient I've ever experienced working in a company is when you just have a living room and a bedroom, and you can just yell at each other, and it seemed to work in the early days, but of course we had to grow and get more sophisticated.
how was the interview? Who did interview you?
Man, the interview was really intense. I had to interview with 12 to 15 people. And it's interesting because I told you I was number 9. And so like half these people weren't even employees. I think they were interns. Um, I had to do 2 phone calls, like screening phone calls to make sure like, okay, is this guy an engineer? Is he a fit for like this kind of business? And then I had to do a 3-hour take home test for coding. And what was interesting was that I had just moved to San Francisco and the rent was already very high in San Francisco and I couldn't
Right.
afford furniture. So I was like sitting on the floor of and I was like in credit card debt and everything. So I didn't have no couch. So I'm sitting on the floor writing my 3-hour coding test. And then I apparently did,
Sorry to interrupt. What language was the coding test? What,
I
Python
think
or?
it was Ruby. So I had done in grad school, I had learned Ruby. And I think at the time, Airbnb was largely Ruby on Rails, and so I knew that, and so that was a big plus is that I was familiar with the language. So I did it all in Ruby, and then we moved to in-person interviews. The company was getting too big. It was still an apartment, but like all the rooms were full. So I remember, one of the co-founders, Nate Placharzik, who was a CTO at the time, he had taken me to a grocery store, and we sat like in the food area of the grocery store. He interviewed me. Then I had to go to a different restaurant, and Joe and Brian interviewed me. And I was so confused during my interview with
Right.
Joe and Brian because Brian was asking me questions like, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? What's your theme song when you enter a room? And then I could tell things were kind of going well. They wanted me to meet every single person that was in the office. I think at that time they really cared about cultivating a really strong trusted dynamic across people. So they wanted people to buy into the next hires. And, I did the same thing when we hired our next engineers. I was, on day 1 of joining the company, I was already involved in interviewing people,
Wow.
which is also how fast we were moving.
How was moving from a company, a small startup, to a large size? Because, for instance, I never worked for a big company, and max I can handle, I think, 10 people, and then I kill the company. If I am with more than 10 people, I'll destroy it. I'm not done for it. So how was this super fast scaling, bliss scaling of Airbnb from inside?
No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of excitement. I think none of us knew that it was going to get as big as it did. And I think there were moments where we'd like pick our head up and be like, wow, we have like all these offices around the world now and all these employees in different countries. And there were moments where it was surreal. And I think the way sometimes it got challenging is that the needs of the company would sometimes outpace the processes we'd have in place. When you hire more and more and more people, you can't run the same process of being like, I mentioned the apartment where things were really like easy to communicate. You have to create new processes. And I think what was shocking was how fast you had to continuously evolve your processes, and actually just even introduce process, because I think a lot of startups, they
Mm.
don't want to have a lot of process.
Yeah.
But the reality is when you have 150 people, it's different than 10. And you don't need a lot of process for 150 people, but you need something. But when you have 5, 6,000 people, um, you have to spend a lot of time communicating, getting people on the same page, and having processes to make that efficient. And so I think there were times where maybe we had a bit of resistance to that because we wanted that startup vibe, but the reality is it's inevitable, I think, as a company grows.
And did you focus on product all the time? What was your main passion over there and focus?
So I had always wanted to be, I was I studied computer science. I have a PhD in synthetic biology, which I, by the way, never used at Airbnb. Um,
Thanks.
we never did biology at Airbnb. And part of that PhD was I built a web app and Rails, Ruby on Rails. And so I started Airbnb as a software engineer, but I knew I wanted to be in product. But I made a gamble and I said, listen, I'm going to learn more about product sitting next to Joe and Brian, who are great designers who were trained at the Rhode Island School of Design in the United States. They're going to help me understand product better if I sit next to them than if I join, Google or Facebook as a product manager, super down in the stack.
Right.
And so I started doing engineering tasks, and we didn't have any product managers. And I started doing engineering tasks. I built our first professional photography program. And what happened was more and more, I was doing less and less engineering things and doing more product things. And eventually we made that official. Became the first head of product management, first head of product for Airbnb. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then towards the end of that, Brian Chesky, myself, and a few others, we started exploring the next businesses beyond homes for Airbnb. And then after we launched Airbnb Experiences, I took over as the head of Airbnb Experiences or general manager of Airbnb Experiences, and then ran that for about 3 years, and then
Got it.
started to wind down.
Did you learn anything interesting or unexpected by working with, for instance, Brian on design, on product, that maybe you were convinced that you should apply certain principles, and then in real life you discovered that you had to do things in a different way?
Oh yeah, so many things. I mean, and that's what I wanted. Like when I was in grad school, I was getting fascinated by design and architecture and all that, and I was kind of like, oh, I wish I had gone to school for this. So I was eating it up. I really loved working with a design heavy founders and a company that really valued design. Especially, you're talking when I joined, Steve Jobs was still alive. The iPhone was only on like iPhone 4. There was still a lot of great stuff coming out. And so yeah, I learned a ton. I mean, some of the big things I took away from working with Brian was, thinking really big. Not you always you would say, don't edit your thinking. A lot of people, my first task was to this, get 10,000 homes shot with professional photography, and a lot of that's at the time that sounded like an astronomical number, and I think he kind of coached me to not think of it that way, and to not sort of limit my own thinking. And I think that's some part why Airbnb did so well, is we didn't really limit our thinking into what this could become. So that was a big one. But also a lot of engineers, especially back there in 2010, they thought of design as individual pixels on a screen, a desktop screen, eventually a mobile screen. But design is, what's that feeling like when you enter an Airbnb? What's the feeling like for a host when they come back after a guest has left? How does that bleed into brand? How does that? And so I was really trained as a scientist and engineer, but I feel like working with, Brian and Joe, they really helped me think more like an artist and a designer. And I really loved that part. And I started to realize that the best products really marry art and science very well.
By the way, how do you take photos of 10,000 Airbnbs or 100,000? I mean, I don't know. That to me seems like a gigantic, undoable task.
Yeah, and I think what ended up over years ended up being a lot more than that, and I think it ended up being one of the largest collections of private, home photography that exists in the world.
Right.
What was interesting was what happened before I took on the project. So the founders were struggling when they were in Y Combinator to get the business to take off, and Paul Graham gave them advice, which is like, where are your customers? Well, our customers in New York. Okay, you're in Silicon Valley, but your customers in New York. Why are you in Silicon Valley? He kept repeating that, and eventually the founders got the hint. Oh, let's go to New York. And so they went and they started spending time with their customers and started seeing, oh, well, the photos don't look really good. I wouldn't want to stay here.
Right.
So they were designers and artists, and so they knew something about photography. They went and they rented cameras, and they went and they shot some properties, and all of a sudden the individual properties look better, but also the entire look and feel of the platform starts to look better. People start to trust it more. And then they said, okay, well, let's start building that into our budget, offering free professional photography to our hosts. The challenge is we're doing it all with interns and uploading, and people just uploading, photography to the platform. We need to actually turn this into like an actual technology, and that's where I came in. I kind of studied what was going on, and then just found ways to replace the human aspects, except for the actual photographer, with an automated system. And but the important point was that the idea was already validated, and I just found a way to automate it, up until the point where yeah, you do want that professional photographer to go and have their eye, the human eye, and then capture a great photo. But then everything else was automated.
Got it. But basically, Airbnb hired tons of photographers around the world to take pictures.
Yeah, we would put announcements out in different cities that we were looking for photographers, that we could send you a number of jobs. You can go and you can do things, and once again, this is kind of during the financial crisis, and so I mean, photographers are excited to get the work, and they're making the site look better, and they're making the hosts make more money, and it was just a win-win situation for everyone.
You said how important it is to think big and have an unedited way of thinking when you maybe approach or tackle a problem. One problem that I see in Italy, and let's say in Europe, but let's focus on Italy for a second, is that the size of funding, for instance, is not the size of funding usually, 95% of the cases, is not the size of funding that you find in Silicon Valley, and the speed of funding is not the same speed. So, to give a very simple example, maybe you get 1 million euros, and it takes 40 months for a startup, and then you see maybe in Silicon Valley, and they get 20 million in 70 seconds. So it's a different competition, because how can I compete with you if you in 40 months have already built a company, and I'm still closing my little round, and then I have to immediately think about the next one. How do you think is possible to solve? And of course, I'm trying to simplify here. And for instance, Scalapay did a $500 million round, so it's not always like that.
No, I don't think there's a magic wand to make this change overnight. I think it's going to take some time, but I do think there are multiple factors that currently might hold the Italian ecosystem back compared to say a France or the United States. And I think that how funding works is certainly one of them. I think Italy should borrow some of the practices that work. I mean, I've also heard things like the terms are not the same, the expectations are not the same. What I was hearing in the United States about Europe, I think it's changing, but investors have much more short-term expectations on the return on their investment. They're a lot less risk averse, and I think meanwhile you have the big funds in Silicon Valley are all like very long-term thinking for how do we make multi-generational companies and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it is the mindset, and I think it's just going to take some time to get some acceleration, and I'm starting to see some positive things happen. So I know, like, for example, Exor just launched their seed program in Italy, and like people are calling it the Y Combinator of Italy, trying to help accelerate these companies. I think they're going to bring some of the alternative ways of approaching investing and make that more commonplace in Italy, and give some of these startups. And I think it will take a lot of things like that. There's not one thing that you can do to completely change the ecosystem. But I do think that changing how funding works is a big part. I would also say what I saw with France is that the government was also helping with financial incentives for startups. And the details I'm not too familiar with, but I think they were, for every dollar you're raising in investment, they would somehow make that available to you in debt, and giving you more options to have funding so that you can bring your idea to market. And I think having the government more involved, more hands-on with cultivating the tech ecosystem here would also be really helpful.
The government, I'm skeptic about Italian government, but this, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe Web3 could also change the way funding is done. I mean, I've just seen this new Kevin Rose project called Moonbirds, which is an NFT collection. I don't know if you're into NFTs and this kind of stuff, but
I couldn't afford one, so I
right.
didn't buy one. But yeah.
I mean, you need to be a millionaire now to afford Moonbirds. But apart from that, I mean, Kevin Rose, Dig founder, and long history in Silicon Valley also as an investor, and they raised, I think, 200 million, over 200 million in, I don't know, 48 hours. So that's their seed round, that, which is interesting. So maybe, yeah, Web3 could be also for Italy a way to solve that problem. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was in Berlin 2 weeks ago, and I met with a metaverse company that is going to be selling the real estate as NFTs on as a way of funding. But they actually don't want to go the traditional route of VCs. But imagine selling land or virtual properties or virtual apartments, and it sounds really crazy, but it just might work. And I think that if that does end up working, that's a really amazing way to fund your company.
What are interesting sectors for you in this moment that you are focusing or thinking that they could maybe be, some hot areas to invest or to launch stuff?
So personally, I invest a lot in music tech. I'm not saying that music tech is going to be hot
Yeah.
or the next thing, but when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a musician when I grew up, and now I have more time, and so I'm spending a lot of effort in that space. Everything from instruments to Web3 to metaverse stuff, and so it kind of cuts across everything. And I'm passionate about it because I would love to see a world where artists are paid more. Um, right now being a musician is very difficult. And with Airbnb and, especially Airbnb experiences, we saw some of our hosts make a few €100,000 a year
Yeah.
on the platform. And that's life changing for doing the work that you love. And so that's a big area for me. I'm, very passionate about, but very early with climate tech, getting more into that. And as I mentioned, like Italian tech is something that I'm getting really interested in. But of course, across everything, a lot in Web3, a lot in crypto, a lot in NFTs, and I think it's to me it's the picture of an ape being the application of an NFT is like saying the spreadsheet is the application of the personal computer. I mean, we're so early, and it's very clear to me that this technology will be extremely useful in ways we can't understand yet. So that's just horizontally, like those technologies I find pretty fascinating.
It's interesting. I've launched my NFT collection a few months ago, and it's a utility NFT. So
Mhm.
you buy this NFT and you have access to
Mhm.
stuff that I do, events or things like that. And the reaction from Italian people living in Italy, because my audience is maybe Italians all over the world, but Italian people living in Italy, it was so bad. Like, oh, you are a scammer. Like, I say, what are you talking about, guys? Like, it's a utility NFT, so you can come to an event. You don't have. It's like you look at this and say, oh, I'm selling you a card. No, this is, you put the card and it opens up a room full of things. It's incredible how maybe now it's changing a bit, the perception, but I got a crazy reaction about NFTs from Italians.
I mean, as an investor, I like that kind of response because you want to be investing in the technology that could be very useful, but everybody thinks is crazy. Because if it's obvious, it's maybe not worth investing in. But
Yeah.
when I joined Airbnb, before I joined Airbnb, and I was in grad school, like in 2007, I was couch surfing. So I would sleep on people's floors, and I would have the best time ever sleeping on someone's floor, sometimes no pillow, for free compared to staying in a paid hotel. And
Right.
what I realized is that, like, well, how much you pay for a travel experience may not actually impact how good the experience is. What matters is you connect with people. And so when Airbnb came around, to me it was very obvious, but to most people they were saying, no,
Yeah.
don't join Airbnb, crazy idea, never going to work, people are bad, like let's just, no, don't do that. And then it took a very long time, and then now, Airbnb is probably a noun, a verb, an adverb. It's very, very common. And for me, I think the idea that I might buy a virtual apartment in the metaverse sounds crazy to people. The idea that I would buy a token that gives me access to community is a crazy idea. But like, I'm involved in some of these, and I think I'm in friends with benefits, for example.
All right.
And it's not much activity in Italy, but man, I wish I was in LA sometimes because there's just so much going on, and there's just so much connection. And it's crazy because this technology, in some ways, is actually creating more human connection.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty bullish on that kind of utility NFT, and I do think, I'm in, I hold a bunch of tokens that give me access to these like Discord servers. I do think we're going to see more and more communities centered around owning a token that we might start to see are really fulfilling and make people really happy.
Yeah, definitely. I will launch soon an NFT pass. Basically, you buy this utility NFT and you will have access to made in Italy products, service, and experiences. So that the idea is, let's use NFT as a Trojan horse that give you access to the best of a country, something like that. Utility country NFT, something like that. But I already know the reaction in Italy will be horrible. That's why I will talk to an international audience. By the way, about music, there are very interesting projects. I mean, Royal.io, Audius, that maybe could help musicians to solve the problem of being better paid than get Spotify revenues.
Yeah, so I'm involved with Royal as an investor,
All right, got it.
And I think it's inevitable that NFTs will replace a lot of things like how royalties are paid out, perhaps even how properties are purchased, or how collectibles, even physical collectibles, are purchased. And just NFTs are just smart contracts, and it's a very, very simple proposition. If you own an NFT, you just get shares of the royalties of a song, and the artist up front gets, they sell the royalties, they get an upfront payment. And so I think it's a really interesting model. Coming back to like, I'm excited about models that help artists get paid more. I think it's a really, really interesting model to explore. And as I said, like, I think most contracts, my guess, 20 years from now, hard to predict when, but I think most contracts could be moved to NFTs.
I recently did a small round of investment, okay? And I called this friend and I say, look, I have this new startup. Would you like to invest? He said, yeah, okay, this amount, great, let's do this. And then it took like 6 months to make it happen, only because lawyers started to chat and talk, and they have to justify their payment. And 6 months, and me and this guy, we were okay. We say, we want to do this now. We don't want to do it no way. It took 6 months. So I can't wait until NFTs will sort of automate this. Some standard clauses are there, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. What about your Italian? How is your Italian? Are you studying some Italian?
I'm studying. It's not going well. So,
right.
So good news is I studied Spanish most of my childhood and adolescence, and so I understand. So I've had a tutor here in Bologna who has been taking me through the structure of the language to kind of help prime me so I can study on my own. And nothing seems crazy to me because I studied Spanish. Most English speakers won't understand a gendered language very easily. So I'm getting better. Half the time I can just say a Spanish word and it's like usually somewhat correct. So I'm getting better, but check back maybe a year from now and maybe I'll be able to say something somewhat intelligible. But at the moment, I'm understanding a lot of stuff like on the street, and it helps that it's a very just beautiful language. I love the sound of it.
Joe, I hope you won't become like me, that after 10 years in UK, I can't speak English and I can't speak Italian anymore. So I don't know what to do, I speak a weird language. I don't understand myself anymore. Interesting. Very, very interesting. You said you are an investor in Royal.io. Are there interesting companies that you're investing in or you are an advisor of?
Yeah, I mean, in the music space, like companies like Hi-Fi that are thinking about financial management for artists, and Splice, like which is a really popular music app. Uh, Other spaces. I was an early investor in Headspace, like the meditation app, and I've probably made somewhere like 40 angel investments in the last several years. And I like helping startups. What's interesting is that now, under my Italian visa, I'm not allowed to actually have working activity as
Right.
per the stipulations of my visa. So I'm helping a lot of companies, including Music Matches, which is where I'm at right now. I'm helping a lot of them without any sort of expectation of compensation, because it's a way for me to kind of keep my learnings alive, and keep myself really engaged. But I also found that I'm eager to build my European tech network. I mean, most of my tech network has been in the United States, and I find that the more I'm able to give companies without sort of expecting anything in return, I actually get a lot in return, and I get a lot of intros, and I get a lot of access to companies that need help, sometimes need an investor. And I just made my first Italian investment like a month ago in an AI company from Torino.
Right.
So I'm starting to get a little bit more active in Italy too.
By the way, about AI, I just recorded a video about fake AI videos, fake AI images, and I checked this company called Metaphysic.ai. I don't
Mhm.
know if you ever heard of it.
No, I haven't heard of it.
They did, the guys that done the Tom Cruise fake
Oh yeah,
video on TikTok. You
yeah. I
know,
think I've seen that. Yeah.
yeah, they've done that basically,
Okay.
and it's very interesting. I mean, because you think, wow, there are a lot of course, there is a problem there with fake news and so on. But if you see it from a content creation point of view, I could, produce my videos where I'm speaking alone and I do a little monologue in a synthetic way. So I just write it down, and then once the AI pick my, way of speaking, that's it. I can do it, or I can speak in 50 different languages. So also, I think that's an interesting sector that I am trying to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, AI AI is so powerful, and it's going to unlock in every industry, from science and the future of medicine to in music. It's being used a lot now, and I think, like, for example, a lot of companies are starting to release like automatically generated music. Not that it's going to replace popular
Right.
music anytime soon, but as like a starting place, or sometimes for meditation or YouTube background music and stuff like that. So I think AI just has an enormous amount of potential, for
I
sure.
was thinking, Joe, also about, you mentioned the network, European
Hmm.
network of contacts. Maybe Web3 is also changing that that part, because before you you had to have like a US centric network of
Hmm.
contacts to succeed in startup land. Let's say that. Now, I mean, I'm interviewing all the top people in Web3, and they are all over. I mean, I don't know, CZ from Binance, he has got a net worth of 100 billion. And I mean, he's not a Silicon Valley guy, or, the founder of Aave, or, I mean, Doc Phone, we can't mention anymore because after the Luna crash, we can't mention anymore. But I mean, they're all over the world. So it's not a US centric network. And that's also interesting, and it is an opportunity. Also, a great crypto community in Italy. So this is also maybe another difference with this Web3 buzzword, but which is real.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two forces. One is, the pandemic massively accelerated the idea of remote work, and not just like remote, you know, from 100 kilometers away, but remote from anywhere in the world. And that's made it more accessible. More accessible. It's made me think that Silicon Valley has been the hub of tech. I think it's going to be a hub of tech moving forward, but not necessarily the hub. And then, of course, on the other side, you have these decentralized new technologies that are changing how people connect, changing how people invest, changing currencies, and they don't know any country borders and stuff. It's so I think it's a very, coming back to your question, like, what are things going to be like right now? I think, when if VCs aren't going to be putting a lot of money into something, well, there's always crypto, and these technologies that can survive during these dark times might end up defining, the next the next wave of tech companies.
Are you following the elongate?
A little bit, like, not the most recent stuff, but I had originally, before I was applying to work at Airbnb, I had wanted to work at Twitter. I think it was like 30 employees at the
All
time.
right.
So I mean, Twitter was a company I was pretty familiar with, and so I was following that a little bit, but I couldn't tell you what the latest is with all of that. And also, being in Italy, I'm not seeing that so much day to day, maybe as I was in San Francisco.
I don't know. I'm just curious to understand what will happen to social media, in the Web3 scenario. How will it change? There will be a decentralization, yes, no, and all the problems related. So I don't know. But if I put my hat of content creator on, I always think, gosh, it's crazy. I produce content on multiple platforms, and from one day to another, they can just freeze my account, shut down, completely cancel, delete your reach. And you think, wow, that's crazy. It's really an unfair relationship that you build with this company. So I'm always trying to think, how will it evolve? And maybe Elon is it's our only hope. I don't know, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was something that we thought a lot about at Airbnb. A lot of our hosts, this was a major source. Renting their home was how they kept their home, was how they put their kids through school, was a major source of income. And so when you make decisions, and sometimes they're warranted, you have to be removed from the platform. Sometimes, some of these platforms, like, I saw your Twitter post about, YouTube, taking you down, without any sort of like, real reason. It has real consequences for real people. And I think, one thing we tried to embrace at Airbnbs, we had a principle, was that our hosts are our partners, our business partners. We are in business partnership with them. And I think, that's a very like subtle phrase, but a lot of us thought about, well, would you do this to your business partner? Would you treat them this way? And as I said, sometimes people have to be removed, but I think in a lot of the cases, it doesn't seem like the people creating the value on these platforms are treated like partners.
Yeah. In my case, it was funny because I contacted my YouTube partner, the person that followed the partnership or follow some creators. And then I had a surreal chat with someone on a chat for, YouTube content creators. And suddenly my channel reappeared. And I say, look, I can see my channel now. And they say, yeah, it's all right now. And I said, but why? Why did you delete my channel? I know it's all right now. It's, the policy. It was against the policy. What policy? What did I do? That's also the problem. If you're not transparent, and I have no idea, it feels like Italy when you deal with law, or accountants. Can I do this? Yes, but if you are bald in Brighton and you stay on the right leg for 3 seconds, is 10K. But if you stay on the left leg, it doesn't work like that. So that's, I think, the other problem that this platform should solve. So you're not their partner at all, and they're not also transparent. So you don't understand what's wrong, what's right, and it's a very difficult job. I understand that it's tricky to handle.
Yeah, and you have millions and millions and millions of content creators, and the company has a lot of pressure to keep its numbers looking really good and not have too many people supporting that. And so things get very automated, and these edge cases become are real people, and they become real problems.
In your Airbnb period, did you have I'm sorry, I'm going straight into gossip now, but I can't resist. Did you have any interesting meeting or conference call with other founders or companies that maybe there was a partnership and you had to do a partnership with, I don't know, Zuck and Facebook? I don't know. It was any moment that you remember, like, oh well, that was a very interesting, different, weird call or meeting that I had, and you still remember it?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of that stuff. I mean, as time went on, you got more and more used to those kind of things. I think the one that stands out to me the most was there was there was a board meeting going on, and I didn't have anything to do with preparing for the board meeting. And then out of nowhere, they text me to come join the board meeting and present some of the product stuff. And I
Right.
had never even seen the slides. And I walk in, and it's like, Reid Hoffman and our board members and like a bunch of like really famous investors that are legendary. And here's me completely unprepared, like playing slide roulette, just like trying to figure out what each slide is. And it went fine, it was great, but I actually walked out feeling really lucky, that I had access to such great people, and some of those people ended up being people I could go to for advice and mentorship, and so I felt myself to be extremely lucky, that
Got
I
it.
was able to have that kind of access for sure.
Got it. Sorry, Joe, for the gossip question, but I recently watched We Crashed. I don't know if you watched it. The
No, no,
real
I'm not. No.
Oh, it's fantastic on Apple TV. I think they did a great job. It's not only stupid gossip about Adam Newman. It's really, I think, a good portrait of scaling a company with the big pressure from investors and, of course, an eclectic, erratic founder. But it's done, I think, pretty well. Great actor, great actress. So I think it's good. I watched that one and Dropout on Disney Plus about Theranos.
Okay.
I think you'll find them very interesting with your background, because it will resonate a lot with you. A lot of characters.
I did enjoy Silicon Valley. I watched the whole series, and
Oh, I
you know,
never
it,
watched it. Yeah, or is
oh,
it good?
it was really funny, and it was a bit triggering at times because like some of the things they got really really spot on in terms of like the characters of Silicon Valley and stuff like that. It's really funny, but like it's sometimes alarming how close to the truth or it could get in
Got
terms
it.
of personalities and characters.
I have to let you go now, but my final curiosity was if there is any company that is not super well known that you are keeping an eye on and you think that they could have a great potential in the next 5 years.
I mean, I could be biased because I'm in their offices right now, but definitely
Right.
Music's Match. Like I think I'm in the music space. I hadn't heard of them. I just one day emailed Max Chochula. I'm like, hey, I'm into music. I'm into advising. We should meet up, and then we became good friends quickly. And the more I dug into their technology in the combination of AI and community, I I'm like, wow, there's something really, really interesting here. And I think that's a pattern I'm seeing with some of the companies I'm seeing in Italy is that you have incredible tech, incredible people, but they may not have the world stage yet. They may not be super well known yet. And I think you have Italy has a history of iconic brands like the
Definitely.
Ferraris and like and then fashion, all that stuff. And I do think we will start to see some iconic brands, tech brands come out of Italy. And I think all the ingredients are there. It just needs to happen.
Yeah, I can't wait that moment for Music's Match so that Max will remember about friends. Basically, that's my pension retirement strategy. Is Max Chochola with Music's Match. Very good, Joe. It was such a pleasure to chat with you. Good luck for all of your activities and for your Bologna. Did you already have lunch, tortellini today, or
Oh, not
something?
yet, but now you put the idea in my mind. So there's like a good tortellini place right outside. So for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joe.
All right,
And let's keep in touch. Bye bye.
we'll do.